to hear some people talk about it. Comics has always been this sort of de facto left-wing medium. Superman beating up a landlord, Captain America punching Hitler, Alan Moore is a communist. These are the sort of examples people use to try and argue that comic books in general is a majority sort of a left-wing medium or is full of left-wing affirmations. But for some reason, The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller does not get computed into this thesis because The Dark Knight Returns, if not explicitly right-wing or conservative or whatever, definitely has some ideas, some philosophies that seem to be in direct opposition to a lot of left-wing dogma. This is a very timely book. It's very coincidental that I read this book at the time that I did, because there's a lot of parallels with stuff going on in the news right now. So I didn't really write out a script or anything, but I put these bookmarks and I wrote little keywords here that will help me get my mind right as I talk about this kind of thing. But again, there's a lot of themes of sort of personal responsibility, of discipline, of free will apart from the state, of the right to defend yourself, to sort of take charge of your own safety, your own body, your own life in general. But here you got these rehabbing Two-Face. That's the bookmark that I put here. So these two gentlemen, these two goofballs, they're sort of representative of, let's say, very liberal, softy, kind of naive. They want to rehab the worst of the worst. Their first little project here is they're going to rehab Two-Face. Deranged murderer Two-Face. He gets his face fixed, and he gets a clean bill of mental and physical health from these two gentlemen. The one gentleman here, as you notice, has been drawn with a little Hitler mustache for whatever reason. I'm not sure what Frank Miller is trying to say there. But here we have the attempted rehabilitation of Two-Face. And of course, does not work. It does not go according to plan. And here we have these two people arguing back and forth about the merits of Batman. There's a lot said about Batman being a fascist. Those are other people's words, not mine. There's a lot said about Batman being a fascist. And so these people are arguing back and forth. Lana Lang is here. And so there's a lot of going back and forth about, like, does Batman have a right to do what he does? Does he have a right to take the law into his own hands? And reading this, it very closely parallels a recent situation that happened in New York City where a person was going insane on the New York subway. A former Marine choked the guy out to try and subdue him, accidentally killed him. This has also sort of happened a few other times. A bodega operator defends himself with a machete from a robber, accidentally kills him, goes to jail. People try and make the person who actually interferes and does something, that person gets, for whatever reason, a disproportionate amount of hate, a disproportionate amount of chastisement than the person who actually committed the crime. It's a very bizarre sort of left-wing brain malfunction that you're just supposed to kind of live in a crime-ridden hell world on and on forever, and you're never supposed to do anything about it. You're never supposed to defend yourself. And when you do defend yourself, you're supposed to do it with like perfect Batman-esque precision. Batman has the luxury of never using too much force and accidentally killing everyone because he is a fictional comic book character. He has the ability to perfectly apply the right amount of force because he is not real. But I feel like something about comic books and comic book movies or something seems to have warped people's brains, where they seem to think that like life is a comic book movie, and that's how like their perception of violence works. Like they think in their mind that they're going to like karate kick someone and they'll be fine. But anyway, what did I write here? Okay, so I wrote on this, bookmark, vigilantism undermines state power. I think that's another sort of common theme throughout The Dark Knight Returns, and another sort of parallel with life as it is today, where these guys here, these guys who are trying to rehab all these psycho criminals here, he says that like Batman's villains are somehow an extension of Batman's own narcissistic personality disorder, but it's less so much that the world and society, it's not so much that they condone vigilantism out of some sort of fidelity to the law. As much as they might pretend to be these sort of syrupy, appealing to the rule of law type characters, it's more that vigilantism undermines state power. If the cops fail, and if the individual takes it upon themselves to protect themselves, and then if people start to get it in their heads that the individual is better at protecting themselves than the state, than the law, than the police, that sort of undermines state power. It undermines their ability to control you. And that's sort of like, there's a lot of that in The Dark Knight Returns. There's a lot of just, again, themes of personal responsibility, personal accountability, not waiting for the state to save you, not waiting to get permission from the state to defend yourself and to protect yourself. We see here again this Hitler-esque gentleman who ostensibly is committed to rehabbing these dangerous, violent, assumably irrevocably so criminals. He rather than blaming the criminals who are actually committing any of these criminal acts, he puts all the blame on Batman. He uses these very loaded words towards Batman, like he's antisocial. Batman is a social disease. Just really kind of naively distorted perception of how the world works. And none of this is to say that all law in general should be disobeyed, or that vigilantism does not have its limits or does not have its failings, because Frank Miller does a good job of sort of critiquing his own thesis here and there. He does offer sort of the devil's advocate in moments where people do take it too far, but I do think there is a real overarching philosophy behind it. It's not so much that he's showing kind of both sides. It's more that he's sort of providing caveats to a sort of overarching philosophical idea. Anyway, so I just bookmarked this page because I thought it was a really good joke. Frank Miller's actually a pretty funny guy here and there. There's this entire setup where... oh no, we're not at the joke yet. The joke's later. But this is, he does a good job of showing these little vignettes where he actually shows the victims of violent crimes. So there's this woman, and she works day after day. She works hard for her money, and she's bringing home an art set for her son, and she just gets blown up by these sick mutants. The mutants are an interesting sort of. I'm not sure exactly what the commentary with the mutants is supposed to be. It's sort of just they're a kind of hyper-violent, almost motiveless class of criminal that just sort of gets by on sheer violence. They're not necessarily committing crimes for money or security or anything like that. And that's sort of, I don't know, maybe it's meant to sort of fly in the face of again, that sort of more liberal left-wing narrative that like of criminals as victims, where it sort of makes it very explicit that these mutants are not, they're not doing something to put food on their table. They're just doing it because they live in a health society where their basic needs are probably already provided, and the only outlet for, I don't know, modernity, psycho-modernity is murder and violence and mayhem. Okay, why did I bookmark this page? I wrote down, not afraid to get weird. Frank Miller is not afraid to get weird. You see here in this drawing of the Batmobile, he's not afraid to get goofy at times. I think there's you could definitely detect some Will Eisner influence in the way that he will sort of exaggerate some characters, like when he draws Alfred. Alfred is very sort of cartoony and exaggerated looking. You can see this guy here. This is a very sort of Will Eisner derived face, I feel like. Here's the one that I marked that it was a funny joke. Funny joke. So this guy says that he's basically been fucked up by porn. He's basically been fucked up by porn and just like a Led Zeppelin record. He listened to a Led Zeppelin record backwards and he thinks it's telling him to kill people. And you get this whole little vignette. And then at the end, you got 3 slain in Batman-inspired porn theater shootout. He clearly was not inspired by Batman, but it was just I don't know, I thought it was a really funny setup and payoff, but also has kind of a thematic relevance in the way that sort of propaganda just sort of puts the blame where it is not truthfully belong. But then here's an example of Frank sort of actually playing devil's advocate and sort of critiquing his own ideas where a guy does actually dress up like Batman. He's kind of not well. He's a boxer. He's probably taken one too many hits to the noggin. So he dresses up like Batman, shoots the guy who's been hassling him. And this is I think an example of Frank sort of again playing devil's advocate, sort of critiquing his own overriding thesis here. But then immediately after, you got another guy who, he hears a scream and he, takes it upon himself to rush into action and to do the right thing. And it shows how as much as the media tries to portray Batman as this like heinous force, he actually sort of inspires normal people to do the right thing and to take possession of themselves and to help other people. So here we have Batman. He defeats the mutants, and you've got this guy here, and they're talking about the mutant leader, and he's like, well, maybe he's just a victim of mental illness. Where have you heard that before? Yeah, he was mentally ill. He was having a mental episode. He freaked out and he pushed someone onto the New York subway tracks. But it wasn't really his fault. He was sick. He was a victim himself. The person who assaults and mugs you and pushes you in front of the train tracks, that person is actually the victim. And that's the person who we should devote the most time and attention and energy towards. And I think The Dark Knight Returns is just sort of a lot of it is a send-up of that sort of attitude, this very overly obsequious, sort of predominantly liberal attitude, almost inverted Christianity, where you turn the other cheek to the point of getting flayed alive. Okay, why did I bookmark this? People will organize around what cultivates the most power. Okay, so I wrote that down because some of the mutants, they splinter off and they become neo-Nazis, while others, they splinter off and they become sort of the Batman gang. And it just kind of shows that they don't really believe in anything, I guess. They don't really believe in anything. They will just sort of gravitate towards whatever will let them hurt the most people. Now we move on to Superman. So one great thing about this book, while this isn't necessarily a splash page per se, it's like a 3/4 splash here. I think this book that makes a great use of splash pages. There's lots of great splash pages in The Dark Knight Returns. Okay, what did I write here? Superman as state power. Okay, so in the world of The Dark Knight Returns, superheroes have kind of been outlawed, it seems. Again, there's a lot to be said in this book about how superheroes kind of undermine state power, and who would undermine state power most of all but Superman. And so Superman kind of the way he probably sees it is it's against his will. The way Batman sees it is just kind of Superman cucked out, but Superman, he's agreed to like sort of go underground so that nobody really knows he exists, or it's kind of illegal or a faux pas to say he exists. Superman is misinformation. Superman is mis and disinformation. But anyway, so he kind of just sort of works for the American government. He's sort of beaten up the Ruskies later. And again, he sort of represents sort of the heavy hand of the state, where if superheroes are an undermining of the state, the next best thing is to sort of bring a superhero under your purview, sort of under your control, and sort of Superman is kind of weaponized in explicitly American interests, kind of the truth, justice, and the American way taken to a very sort of sinister end. Okay, so here we have them trying to rehab the Joker. The Joker goes on a sort of David Letterman type television show. Again, it's sort of this idea that the person who does the evil, the person who commits all these heinous crimes, he is somehow portrayed as a victim. It's sort of the refutation of any sense of personal responsibility. In this world, everyone is just kind of a victim, and every motivation it is derived from victimhood. It is derived from inequality, some sort of societal disadvantage, to this sort of full throttle liberalism in The Dark Knight Returns, and that parallels shit we see today. The idea of personal responsibility is just like, it's a myth. It's a right-wing dog whistle. Personal responsibility itself is fascist or whatever. Personal responsibility is I don't know, some sort of boogeyman. But then again, we have some more sort of self-critique of this idea, some more sort of caveats where this guy in the Batman gang, he does good and he stops these one band of robbers, but then he sort of attacks the shop owner for not defending himself. Here, this would be an example of this kind of ethos of personal responsibility sort of taken to the extreme, sort of taken into a kind of dark, sinister edge. I think that Batman, if Batman sort of represents kind of that one guy, that few because not, I guess one message would be that, like, not everybody is really equipped. Not everybody is equipped for power, I guess. Not everybody who is capable of defending themselves or is capable of self-possession will use it for the betterment of others. Batman sort of represents that guy who can, for the most part, can kind of walk the middle road. You see a Batman in this one who kind of delights in violence. He likes beating the shit out of bad guys. He's kind of a sicko in a lot of ways, but he's also able to sort of restrain himself and to hold himself back. So another theme would be, like, again, sort of guns versus sort of personal responsibility. I don't know why I wrote that, because it's rather that guns does not equal power necessarily, is I think what sort of Frank Miller is getting at. That, like, guns are not a substitute for personal responsibility. You see this guy here, he's kind of a Weasley piece of shit, and this is a guy who does get a hold of a gun and sort of doesn't use it well, let's say. And then, of course, we've got Batman, who sort of, I'm not sure why, in this book, they sort of show him using what appears to be guns. They have the appearance of guns, but then they're more like sort of as traditional grappling hooks, or I forget what the other one is. And I'm not sure if that's supposed to be some sort of commentary or what. But then, so here again, we have sort of examples of Batman inspiring people to sort of, again, take a situation into their own hands. They're not waiting for permission from the government, from the fire department, from the cops, from the ambulances. This is a guy who's helping another guy. These are people helping each other. These are people who are recognizing that they have an impact on the world around them, and then making use of that in a positive way. Okay, what did I write here? Healthy discipline. There you go. So I wrote on this little, like, another sort of ethos of this particular Batman, and I think part of the message that Frank Miller is trying to get across in The Dark Knight Returns is just sort of a healthy sort of discipline. And discipline can be used for sort of positive ends and to build positive things. Like you see here at the end, he's trying to teach the mutants and the bat gangs. He's trying to teach all these wayward piece of shits through discipline and through just sort of, I don't know, trying to not be a piece of shit, that you can make something good, I guess. That is again sort of not dependent on the state, not dependent on permission from the state, not dependent on a system that can just as easily strip you of your right to live and to freedom. Freedom! Damn it! Shit like that. Shit like that. And anyway, that's all I got to say about the book Dark Knight Returns. Goodbye.